Well, hello and welcome to the long-awaited return of the Slow Chats. This is something that I kicked off in 2020. We all were sitting at home. We had nothing better to do. I kept them going for a couple of years, and they've been gone for a couple of years now. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be bringing back the Slow Chat. And my guest for the very first return Slow Chat is none other than Jim Penman, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to because not only is he an icon from my childhood, seeing his bearded smiling face on the side of every second trailer that would pass me by, but actually there's some family connection there as well. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that as we go through tonight. Just going to say a quick hello. There's a few of you already jumping into the comments. Thank you for that. Turtles Toy Box, evening everyone. Al Gore joins us. Al, you would have to be one of my most faithful and loyal fans. I do appreciate your continued determination to show up to everything I do. Jim should grow the beard back. Look, actually, you know what? He's a pretty handsome looking bloke either way. I got to say, he was blessed with some good genes. Actually, I'm not allowed to say that anymore. That's a Nazi reference now. I think ever since that not TV commercial. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean. I don't know what I'm talking about. I never do. All right. Good evening, all. Says go by rail. Melissa, I miss a good slow chat. They kept me sane during COVID, refreshing to get to bed late into the evening when I had to be at work the next day. My record, I think, was 5 hours on a single slow chat. We are not going to break that record tonight, I promise you. I have other things I need to do in the morning. All right, well, with 100 people have piled on already, we are going to hit over 1,000 at some point tonight, but 100 is probably enough to get started. Would you please put your hands together? I don't know why, but you're in your own home. Why not give a round of applause to Jim Penman. Jim, thank you so much for joining me on the Slow Chat.
Yeah, good to be here.
Now, we were actually just having a quick chat off air. We've not actually spoken directly in literally decades, but we did pass paths a long time ago. And actually, I mentioned to you, because I wasn't sure if you're going to remember him or not, my older brother, Jonathan. And you most certainly remember him. He worked for you for some time. Tell us a bit about, before we get into your business and how you started and everything else, I'm fascinated. How did you even end up employing a 14-year-old inexperienced computer programmer?
Well, he was recommended by somebody else who wasn't much older at the time. He started working for us, and he was just brilliant. He picked things up so fast. I tell you what, I've never had anybody better than him. He was amazing. I was so sad to lose him actually when he grew up.
Yeah, well, he's actually still to this day very, very proud of the work that he did with you. And you had this vision for this really integrated IT system where your receptionists would be able to pick up the phone, the system would recognize the customer or the customer number and bring up on the computer screen the information. They'd be able to pick up the phone and it would work so quickly they could actually say the customer's name. Hello, Jim, nice to hear from you again. And he worked very hard to deliver on that. And I don't remember the details of how close he got, but we're talking the 1990s at this point. We're talking actually in the earliest times, we would have been talking the mid 1990s as a 14, 15-year-old kid. He was pioneering with you some of that kind of technology that really didn't exist back then. So it's quite extraordinary. And obviously you must be a good teacher and a good mentor because he's gone on to have a very, very successful career as a programmer and now lives in the US with his family.
About anything, not about programming, because I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't know how to do a single line of code. But he was great, and we weren't prejudiced. I guess we didn't care if he was 14. He was just good. I don't care who anybody is, male, female, old, young. It's just you're good at your job. That's all that matters.
Yep, 100%. And I think we're seeing a return to that. A return to excellence is what I've dubbed it. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. We're going to have plenty of talking about all of that sort of stuff. Oops, there we go. So I wanted to get a little bit of your background before we dive into, we're going to talk politics, we're going to talk population, we're going to talk all kinds of things that I know are of interest to you based on your social media posts and your public posts and so forth. But I'm aware that not everyone is as aware of you as what I was growing up. You were all over the trailers in my neighborhood, and at first it was Mowing, and then I remember seeing antennas, it might have been, and then suddenly realizing that there's this sort of Jim's everything. You were the superstore that came to you. It was all these different branches of Jim's that could just about solve every single problem. But actually, there's also some really fascinating, I guess, business philosophy that I want to explore with you. You've developed this mantra of every customer a fan. And I want to get to that and explore that a little bit later. But how did you start? Did you always have a driving ambition to push a lawnmower? Was this something that you fell into to meet a need and plug a gap? how did you end up as Jim's Mowing in the very, very first place?
A lot less grand than that, Topher. I started off as a teenager interested in the rise and fall of civilization. And I went to university to try and pursue that, to try and understand what happened, why it happened, why the Roman Empire fell. I've been fascinated since I was 14. And I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to do a postgraduate degree. I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to develop and present my ideas. And lawn mowing was simply a way of paying the bills. Now, lawn mowing was a good job because it paid very well for a student job. I could do a lawn for $5, which took me half an hour. So pretty good money back in the 70s. I even bought my first house basically out of lawn mowing, which you could in those days before stupid zoning regulations made it impossible. And it was outside. It was physical exercise. And I love being outside. I love gardens. I love trees. I love grass. So it was a brilliant job. And all that happened is that I got to the end of my PhD in 1982, and I realized I had absolutely no possibility of an academic career of any kind. I was just wildly unorthodox in my ideas. There's no possible way anybody would employ me in that field. And also, one of the problems was that my research, which started off in history, actually led me into fields of biology and genetics and so forth. It became I decided that the key to civilization was actually to do with physiology, to do with genetics and so forth. So what I really had to do at that stage was work out a way how to become rich enough to be able to fund my own research institute, my own neuroscience research institute. At that stage, I was flat broke, $35,000 in debt, and the only thing I knew how to do for a living was mow lawns. So it started from that. So no grand scheme.
So it's quite incredible to me that you started out studying the fall of the Roman Empire, and now in a way we're kind of reliving it. Does it feel a bit familiar when you think back to what you studied?
I had a suspicion from a long time ago that we were on the same path. And back in the 70s, it was a lot less obvious, but every year since then, it's become more and more obvious. We're going through the same kind of process, the decline of faith, of traditional morality, the plunging birth rate, especially in recent decades, the decline of family, the declining work ethic, the rise of death of despair, of drug addiction and stuff. It's really obvious that we're going through this civilization decline crisis.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me. There must have been a couple of key moments in that journey early on. As you say, there was no grand plan. And I want to stick with just talking business for a moment. There was no grand plan, but there has to have been a moment where Jim's Mowing in that original form went from being you on the mower to being you and somebody else. That moment where you said, okay, I'm going to make this bigger than just me. What was it that catalyzed that?
It wasn't one thing. It was a whole lot of tiny little things. People often have this idea of business that you're sort of puddling along, doing a real job, and you suddenly say, well, what if I did this? And suddenly you're wealthy and successful. It's not. It's 1,000 little daily steps. When I'm mowing the lawn, how can I turn the mower around at the end of it without breaking? How can I do a perfect edge in limited time? How can I travel between jobs? And then when I started to get to work, then I started to think, okay, can I put a person on? How do I manage that? Do I employ them? Do I subcontract them? How do I find more work? And it just kept on going. It was very, very gradual without really much of an idea except looking at what I'm doing and saying, how can I do it better? If you'd have told me in those days that I'd one day have 5,500 mowing contractors, I would say, what are you smoking? I mean, come on, get off the weed, for heaven's sake.
All right. So fast forwarding just a little bit then, what was the decision to franchise? Was franchising something you'd already been exposed to previously? I mean, there's different ways to grow a business. You could have brought on more employees and grown it as an owner-owned type of business. You went the franchising route. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you, Topher, and probably if you're listening, no grand plan or insight or scheme. Yeah. What simply happened was I had thought about franchising, but I used to have a business building up and selling lawn mowing rounds. That's what I went to, from employing people, subcontractors, to building up and selling lawn mowing rounds. And that was kind of, I thought, as a temporary thing until something real came along.
Right.
And I thought about franchising, but I thought, what's the point of a franchise? Because I knew I could help somebody to get a business. That's what I used to do when I sold lawn mowing rounds. But why would they keep on paying me fees? after I built their business. And I couldn't comprehend that. And I couldn't believe in it. I couldn't sell it. I just couldn't see what I would sell to somebody. And actually what happened really wasn't me at all. It was a company called VIP that came in from Adelaide.
Yes.
And they were franchising. And I had a look at their system and I thought, yeah, there are benefits to what they're doing. Because, for example, if you're a mowing contractor, you break your leg, you're off for 6 weeks, your clients are all gone. But if you're part of a franchise, you can work together. And that sort of appealed to me. So I thought, okay, look, these sound like a strong crowd. And obviously, I had this little piddling company building up lawn grounds. There was nothing. They had 250 franchisees. They were interstate. They had fancy offices. They had all this stuff. I had no clues as to what. So my first thought was, let me join them. Okay. So I rang up the state manager and said, I'm Jim Penman from Jim's Mowing, which is what he called it in those days. And he said, you know who you are. And he said, look, I really don't think I compete with you guys. What if I just join up with you and help to build your business? And he said, well, no, thanks. I'm interested in that. So I thought, all right, okay, this is a bit of a problem. These giant businesses are going to crush me. So I decided to raid their expo. That was 1988 in the old exhibition buildings in Exhibition Street. And I went in and they gave me a badge at the door and I took it off because I didn't want to know who I was. And I went to the stand and there was a guy standing there. And I said, I'm very interested in VIP. Please tell me. Now, the problem with me, I'm an extremely bad liar. If he'd have asked me what I wanted, I said, well, I want to compete with you and see if I can beat you. But fortunately, he didn't ask. And he sort of gave me this information about this company and gave me this brochure, which I just about pulled apart with a microscope. I didn't even know what a heat seal binding was. It just everything about it. I studied. And then the state manager came in and said, that's Jim Penman. Don't tell him anything else. So they kicked me off the stand. So I took it away and I read it and I thought, well, okay, I can see benefits to this. I could see why a person might want to buy and stay with the franchise. But you know what? If I was a potential franchisee, I reckon I want something different. I'd want a bit more. So I thought, okay, how can I devise a system that would appeal to me, that I want to join and I want to stay with? So I looked at what they did and they picked out things I didn't like. For example, the fact that I think in those days you only have one trailer. I thought, no, what's stopping you? As many as you like, same fees. And if somebody came into to a new franchise we put in, they would come and take your regular clients from that area and give them to the new guy. And so if I was a franchisee, I wouldn't like that to happen to me. So I'm going to rule it out. So I put a whole lot of clauses in. Renewal. I thought if I had a franchise, I would want the automatic right to renewal. So I put that in there. Right to territory. I said, if a job comes into the territory and you want it, you get it. But you can work wherever you like. So if you get a referral, you can work. Because I thought as a franchisee, that's what I like.
Right.
So I developed a system that I thought was the best possible it could be. And I put a whole lot of restrictions on myself as franchisor.
Yeah.
The lawyers didn't like it at all. They said to me, this is ridiculous stuff. Nobody does this kind of thing because what they said is you're being too nice. You're giving yourself the franchise too much power. And I said, but I want something that I want to join. And when I had what I thought was a good contract, I looked at their contract. I hated it. It was so restrictive. It was just, no way would I sign that. So I actually got a bunch of people together. I wanted to be my first franchisee. Some of my best subbies, I had some good ones, and people who bought lawn mowing grounds off me. And I said, I'll swap you one for a franchise, and then you can walk away if you want to, if it doesn't work out for you. So I got these dozen guys into a room, showed them the contract, said, what do you think? And they came back to me and said, well, we don't like this, we don't like that. So I changed it. I just got a contract that these people, my first franchisees, would sign. And then finalized it, gave it to them, and half of them signed. And that was my first 6 franchisees. And so they just grew from there. And somebody asked me at the beginning, they said, how many franchisees do you think you might have one day? And I said, look, I don't know if it's going to work. I really don't. But maybe, just maybe, if it works very well, one day I could have as many as 100. I actually said that to them. 100. That was my sky goal, just to survive. That's all I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But what's the funny thing about that contract? The lawyers said to me at the time, they said, you're going to want to tighten this up. This is crazy stuff. You know what? With time, I actually did the opposite. I gave my franchisees more power. I gave the power to change to a different region, or in recent years, a different division. They could vote out the franchise, or they could veto changes to their own manual. There's even a clause in the contract now that says the majority control of Jim's Group cannot be sold without the written consent of a majority of franchisees. That came in only last year because I want to protect them in case I'm no longer around. So all this stuff I gave my franchisees more power. And it was
okay. So, Jim, as I listen to you talk, it's amazing. And you're right, no one does that. But it makes a lot of sense to me. And it makes a lot of sense to me because I came across some years ago a book by the title of Maverick by Ricardo Semler. Is that one that you're familiar with?
No, I've read it. Yes, it's a good book. I loved it. I read it more than once. And this is all about democracy in the workplace. Yes.
Yeah. And empowering the people. And in essence, he turned his own sort of divisional managers and then the workshop managers into essentially their own business owners and operators, and really empowered them and gave them some trust. And it sounds like you've followed a similar path from a different place. You've followed a similar path with Jim's. Not
with my employees, I'm afraid to say. I've tried that kind of stuff. It never really worked out. But with my franchisees, it's very different. It's the whole principle of listening. It's in as a Christian, it's what we think of as servant leadership. You know, the idea of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And that's the principle. That's why I give my phone number and email address to every new franchisee at training. I've just finished the course today, and I write it up on the board and I say, you contact me, and anytime. Daytime, evenings, weekends, public holidays, anytime at all, you've got a problem, you contact me. And I tell them again and again, don't be afraid to contact me. I want to hear from you. I want to know where you're going. I want to be able to help. And I want you to tell me how I can improve what we do for you. And the only way I can do it is you communicate with me. And after 1 month, I send them a letter and I ask them how they're going and are they doing this pay for work guarantee thing we offer. And I really try, and probably about a half dozen franchises a day will contact me about something. So I'm in constant contact with them, knowing what to do, which again, people think is very strange for a CEO, but I find it extraordinarily useful. It really is to know what's going on. I can see the problems and I say, why is this happening?
Well, that level of feedback and the honesty, if you've earned that trust and people really believe you when you say, hey, I want to hear from you, then you'll get insights from them that many a CEO won't get, simply because people are afraid to actually speak up and say what they really think.
That's right. And I mostly answer emails within a few hours too. I would clear my inbox at least once a day, usually more often.
Well, you're more on top of it than I am, I can tell you that, Jim. So let's just fast forward a little bit further, because there has to have been a moment in time where you realized that what you'd created was no longer just a mowing business. Was this, did you see this coming from a long way away, or was this an aha moment where you realized, hang on, I've built a machine that can apply to all kinds of different industries, all kinds of different types of franchises?
Well, again, Topher, I'm going to have to disappoint you about this thing about me having this great vision, because it wasn't like that at all. What happened was that I had this system of work and so forth and computerization that was working okay. And I thought, let's try it to cleaning. Okay, that's just to try it cleaning. But I thought, hang on a minute. This is a guy with a beard and a hat. This is a gardener. That's what I used to look like, the beard, the hat. That's my gardening.
Yeah, it was great.
But that's not, what's that to do with cleaning? I mean, cleaning is a different image. You want a woman, or you'd want something female. Why would a woman want to carry this ridiculous man with a beard and a hat going into somebody's house? It's so inappropriate for a cleaning company. So I devised this new logo called Sunlight, S-U-N-L-I-T, with these little sprays, and it had a design done, and I sold a couple of franchises. And I tried to find the work, and it was absolutely hopeless. Couldn't do it, gave it back, the money back. I said, sorry, I can't do it. It doesn't work for us. And then somebody come to me and said, what about Jim's cleaning? I said, no, because this is a guy with the beard and the hat. This is a gardener. That's what I looked like in those days. So you could put a hat on. It's me. That's me. That's that logo come from. And they said, we think Jim's cleaning would work. And I said, no, it wouldn't, because it's a bloody gardening image. What's wrong with you? Why can't you understand this? And they said, we are convinced it will work. We're so convinced we will do it ourselves in partnership with you, kind of licensing in a way. And I said, well, okay, give it a go. It's your funeral. And it worked. So I was completely wrong. Completely wrong.
Look, that doesn't surprise me at all, in the sense, not that you were wrong, but in the sense that the Jim's name had even I think back to my not earliest childhood, but I think back to when I can remember these sorts of things. The Jim's name has always had a good reputation. And Yeah, I mean, in my family, I was the one pushing. We didn't even have a motor mower. We had a push mower, one of those ones that uses the friction of the ground to spin the blades. And poor little me, because I was the youngest of 5 boys growing up, and then later on I had a little sister and a little brother born, but I was the youngest growing up. And yeah, I was always the one on the push mower. So we never used any Jim's Mowing Services or any other franchise. But even so, the name, the reputation held an awful lot of currency. So we come to today, and obviously I'm looking forward to talking politics with you, and all there's so much other stuff that I really want to get into. But just give people an idea of this Jim guy who went to university to study history and the fall of civilizations and become an academic, and ended up having to stick with mowing lawns. And then the impression you've given me, beg your pardon if this phrasing doesn't suit you, but the impression you've given me is that you've bumbled your way through. And I'm not sure how true that really is, but that is the impression that you're giving. Where are you at now? What is Jim's now?
Well, about 5,500 franchisees and about 50 divisions, some a lot bigger than others, of course. Giving pretty good support to franchisees. We could always do better, and giving pretty good support service to clients, so we could still do better at that one too. So I think the thing I'm most proud of, Topher, honestly, is that the values that I have, which is very, very pro-franchisee. At the top of my email, which you've got there, our first priority is the welfare of franchisees. We're also passionate about customers. We've signed only franchisees and franchisors we are convinced will succeed. That top thing, our first priority is the welfare of franchisee, is one of the keystones of my life. That's what I live for. That's why I can't stand the thought if I'm no longer around, my franchise wouldn't be protected. That is a moral crusade in a way. I identify with my people. That's why I was so outraged about the lockdown, because it was hurting my own people. That's my extended family. And that's and if you ask me one thing that I'm proud of, and people say you must be proud of having 5,500 franchisees or whatever, biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. We make these kinds of statements, but that's the thing I'm really proud of, is the fact that in general, throughout Jim's group, most people, especially franchisors, share my values. They're very, very supportive of franchisees. They care passionately about franchisees. During the lockdown in Victoria, we were locked down for 2 months. We could not do anything. This insane, senseless restriction. So my franchisees, of course, weren't being charged fees. But you know what? My franchisors worked harder during those 2 months than they had before or since, because they were not getting paid, but they had these people like their children. They were looking after them, and they were supporting them, and they were ringing them, and they were doing everything they could to help them and make them feel okay about it. And I was talking with them too. We were all working harder than before or since, even though there was no money coming through. And nobody ever suggested anything else we should do. There was never any suggestion we should charge them. There was never any suggestion we wouldn't provide support. They all just backed magnificently. And the franchisees backed themselves too. I had people ringing me up and saying, listen, I've got no work, but I'm in a good situation. Can I help anybody? There was one lady who was dog wash. Now, she was a student, no government income. She had all kinds of expenses, and the government forbade her to work, and she wasn't allowed to. Now, she was faced with, she couldn't pay her bills. She was threatened with eviction from her property. She didn't have the money to buy food. But you know what? Other franchisees gathered around, and they're out of work too, don't forget. And they helped her out, and they bought her food vouchers. We said, if you get evicted, you come and stay in our conference centre, which is vacant. We will look after you. We helped her with ourselves. But everybody just did this caring for her in that situation. Now, since then, I've heard she's done brilliantly. Last time I heard she was making $5,000 a week. So she's a great operator.
Wow. Yeah.
Just that was very moving. It really was. It was an awful time, but in a sense, it was one of the greatest times we ever had. It's a bit like the Blitz in London. People say it was the worst time, but it was also the best of time, because people really hang together when a crisis comes. And I was so proud of my people.
And rightly so. Culture comes from the top. You don't end up with a culture like that amongst your organization if they're not seeing it modeled from the very top. So I think that's a wonderful reflection on you. And Jim, you don't know my story particularly, and there's no reason why you would. I was in Melbourne all the way through that, and I was deeply involved in the efforts to try and get the government to ease the lockdowns and so forth. And for anyone that's watching that maybe doesn't know my story, battlegroundmelbourne.com, you can go there and watch the documentary for free. I've won 14 awards for the documentary that I directed. But it's not my story. I directed it. I told the story, but it's the story of Victorians, amazing people who stood up during that time. And yeah, really, really tough time for a lot of people. So battlegroundmelbourne.com, you can watch it for free. You don't have to give me any money. You don't even have to give me your email address. You can just watch that documentary there. So this from what you just said, there are so many places that I wanted to go, but there's one last question that I really want to get through before we get to all the other political stuff, because I think once we go there, we're never coming back. And that is your mantra of every customer a raving fan. Where did that come from, and what does that mean in practice?
Look, my franchisees are first, but to look after a franchise properly, you have to give great service to clients. It's great service is essential, because if a franchisee doesn't give great service, they don't tend to do as well. But not only that, but every time a franchisee gives good service, the word spreads. And if they do bad, it spreads too. So it helps the leads to keep on coming in. It keeps my guys busy. But the thing about customer service is this. People sometimes think of it as a sort of a logical, reasonable thing. You know, you do the best you can so that customer will be happy and so forth. To me, it's a very emotional thing. I remember when I was mowing lawns, and people would say to me things like, I never knew my lawn could look this good. And that was really meaningful. I was passionate. I just hated to let customers down. I hated to do anything less than a perfect job. It was just an emotional driver. So what I want from that is this sense of not just, hey, that's good enough, but wow, this is fantastic. This is great. This is so good. You know, I've got a guy, Matt Cathy, actually, who does he's the Jim's antennas guy, does all my digital work. And this guy is so good. You put a message to him, he'll respond to you straight away. He'll let you know he's coming. He takes his shoes off in the house. He's so helpful, such a great guy. That is a perfect example of a Jim's attitude, which goes above and beyond. And as I was speaking this afternoon, it happened because he rang me about something. And I said, if I ever need any work needed done, Matt, I'll always call you, because he's so good. He's done work for me here at my farm, everywhere. He's just a great guy. And that's that experience that I had with him, which is so good that I want to use him again and again. And because that reflects on everything else. So if somebody who talks to someone like Matt Cathy, gets his service, they say, well, look, Matt was so good with the antennas. I only get my lawns mowed, my gyms, or my cleaning done, or my pest control, or my dog wash, because Matt is good.
Yeah. And I think that's the genius of the business model that you allege that you stumbled into, is that the brand trust does translate across those different industries. We're going to go to politics, but I'm going to go there via a quick story about my own Jim's mowing guy, and it's probably you're probably going to be furious at the end, not because he did anything wrong or anything that's a bad reflection on Jim's. We'll see where this goes. So I moved to Albury. And I live on a very steep hill, and we went looking for a mowing person who could mow that. I didn't want to have to deal with the steepness of it. It was steep enough that it began to be risky. And so I called up a few different places. They came and gave me quotes. One mob just flat out refused. I said, no, I'm not even going to do it. Another mob gave me a quote that seemed like they were kind of taking the piss a little bit. And then we had Jim's come and give us a quote. And he came in very reasonably, and he was very chipper. And actually, it was his demeanor about the whole thing. The others had been, oh, look, this is really difficult. This is tough. This is that. He looked at it and said, oh, well, I'll need my stand-up ride-on mower because it's got a lower center of gravity. But if I bring that with me, it'll be no problem. And he had just this really great approach. And so I said, fantastic. And we used him for as long as he was available. Can I tell you what he left? He left Jim's mowing, and he quit gardening and lawn care and so forth altogether. He went to work for the NDIS as a support worker. And honestly, I cannot blame him. I cannot blame him. He was not a young man. He wasn't an old man by any stretch, but he was not a young man. And the amount of money being offered as an NDIS support worker is extraordinary. I'm sure you're aware of that. And the whole scheme is costing us extraordinary amounts of money. But it struck me as an enormous loss because I have not been able to replace him with someone nearly as good since. And what a terrible shame that we're now misallocating resources. He was a man who was brilliant at what he did. And I'm sure he does a wonderful job of being an NDIS carer as well. But we've moved him from an area of true excellence and an area where I can't help but feel that in the end, the productivity and the result of his work is somewhat diminished for the rest of us. Is this something that you're noticing across your business or across even among in the client space, where we're seeing people shifting away from genuinely productive work and into less productive roles?
I think there's a prejudice against real work. Really, there's a prejudice against getting your hands dirty. And I think that's very sad. I think this idea that every young person has to go to university and spend their life sitting in front of a computer is fundamentally wrong. My franchisees, based on our surveys, make well over the average Australian income. This is the business that requires no education, very little capital, and it's a great lifestyle business. It's a great, great business. I am so grateful that I stumbled into lawn mowing as a business, because it's been great for me and for so many other people. And I just think that the lure of the white-collar job is just crazy. One of the things about it, too, is this, that people think that somehow if you're a lawyer or you're a banker or you're an accountant, you've made it, you're going to be happier. Well, actual fact, all the research shows that it's quite the opposite. Doing an active job like being something like a gardener or even a florist to do with natural things, working with your hands, even construction workers come out quite high in terms of life satisfaction, physical, outdoor work. And I think it's a great pity people are going away from that. And I think a lot of government jobs are basically essentially parasitic. I don't have much good to say about the NDIS. Look, frankly, we make a fortune out of it. We absolutely do.
Sure. Yeah.
But the way that it's allocated, the way it's expanded beyond all, it's obscene. And it's just going higher and higher and higher. There is no controls. There is no limits. There is no sense to what they're doing. It's just mind-boggling, and it's blowing out the national debt. We are borrowing more and more in the time of prosperity. We should be cutting back on debt. We should be saving for the time we need it. We should be spending more on defense, which I'm pretty happy with. We're in a dangerous part of the world, and we're squandering it on this, and we're taking competent, capable people out of the real economy and putting them into jobs which have no benefit to society. And there's a lot of it. And I would think that we could probably get rid of 2/3 of the bureaucrats in the country, and we'd be a lot wealthier and better country for it.
You're preaching to the converted on that front. My concern with things like the NDIS, I don't want anyone to be left genuinely in the lurch. I don't believe you do either. But there is a point where we do have to start to question the value for money. And where I get really concerned is things like going shopping with someone. Now, I understand that there are people that need that sort of thing to be done for them. But in many cases, this is just companionship. This is someone who could have had their groceries or their shopping delivered, or this is someone who could, with a special type of taxi or with some lot lesser support, could have gone out there and done it themselves. And what we're doing is we're now taking somebody who could have done a productive job like Jim's mowing and making them the support worker. So now that's one productive person taken out of the economy. But secondly, the salary that they're being paid or the wage that they're being paid is now being taken off someone else who is being productive. So there's essentially a second person's worth of value being sucked out of the economy. And then in the third instance, what they're doing is they're causing, in many cases, this is not universal, but in many cases we know that they're causing people on the NDIS, the incentives on the NDIS is to need as much support as possible. And so do as little for yourself as you can, need as much support as you can. So even that person is being diminished. They're no longer actually providing what they could have been and capable of providing. So in a sense, for every NDIS person that doesn't absolutely need to be there, we're actually taking 3 productive people out of the economy. Jim Chalmers just came out, not Jim Chalmers, the head of the RBA just came out, I think it was yesterday, saying that productivity is a huge, huge problem in Australia. The graph is quite telling. Our productivity has fallen off a cliff at the same time as our standard of living and household disposable income have. Where do you see this going? Is this something that where Australians are going to recognize, oh, hang on, we've made a mistake. Productivity is down. That's what's hurting our cost of living. That's what's hurting our disposable income. Let's come back. Or are we in a more serious spiral here?
No, we're in a serious spiral. We're going down, and it's not going to reverse itself in a hurry. I'd love to think that we could make the argument, but the fact of the matter is we're not. Look, Australian character has changed. If you look at the kind of people we were back, say, in the Second World War, the diggers and so forth, the things they did and their courage and their hardiness and their egalitarianism, it's just amazing. The weak softness we have in the modern world is, even during the 80s, during the era of Hawke and Keating and Howard and Costello, we had a country that was prepared to accept strong, effective leadership, balance the budget, pay off the national debt. We had great political leaders in those because we supported them. Now we've got a situation where everybody says, what's in it for me? How can I get more? How can I pay less? And that's why you get expanding social work for other places. And we can't pay enough taxes, so we get more and more debt. It's a shocking decay in character. And people are getting less and less idea of the cost of things. They have all these regulations, and they're all done with the best standards in mind, but they don't understand that every time you put a regulation, there's a cost. So you're costing, and first of all, because you're crippling the economy. We spend so much money dealing with bureaucracy and all this labor and all this stuff. It's getting worse and worse, and the franchising code is getting more and more detailed and comprehensive. And it's like trying to run. It's like if we had our Olympic athletes and we said, okay, as part of the uniform, you're all going to carry a ball and chain, and you can run the Olympics. You can try to sprint, but you've got to carry this ball. That's our uniform. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, productivity is more important. It creates wealth. It creates everything, and we're making it so hard. And then, as you say, to enforce all these absurd, stifling rules, we take good quality people out of the reductive economy and put them into jobs which are basically parasitical. And I'm not saying that all governments are parasites. Governments do wonderful things. They keep the food safe. They keep the air clean. The police force, Victorian police are magnificent people. I mean, we need government to do useful things, but they're doing so much that's actually destructive. And a perfect example of the whole thing is the taxi industry, okay? For many years, the government said our involvement in taxi is to stop having taxis, so we'll have medallions, okay? So it's a government-enforced monopoly. And then people like Uber and Didi come along, and they basically use clever technology to get round the government monopoly. And you know what happens? Service goes up, prices go down, and the actual drivers end up making more money because they're not paying for the stupid medallions. So all you have to do is to get rid of the government, and you have better service, lower prices, a better deal for the worker. The government was doing all that as a damage, and that goes everywhere in the economy. The government is doing things that are destructive and negative. And if we could just relieve the society of these burdens and get people into decent, productive jobs and out of parasitical, do-nothing jobs like NDIS consultants and so forth, then we would see productivity start to rise. How kind of you're making us run the Olympics with a ball and chain. How can you not expect productivity to go down?
Yeah. And you see that every day in your business, but you're seeing that as an established business, as you say that, the largest franchise organization in the Southern Hemisphere, a very, very successful business, and yet you still feel the weight of that. Do you think it's possible today for the next generation, let's say a 20-year-old Jim Penman today, would it be possible for someone to actually survive through that myriad of red tape and regulation and navigate all of that on top of the challenges of business?
Okay, let me tell you one thing. The regulations that we're about, I think they're terrible for society and industry, but they're actually not bad for the industry leaders. Because when you have an insanely complicated franchising system, it makes it very, very difficult to start. And the thing about us, we sign 1,000 contracts a year, so we've got it very heavily automated. We spend millions of dollars a year on software that makes these things real. A disclosure document to us is just pressing a key. It's quite simple. It doesn't take long. It's tiny. Now, if you're a small person trying to compete with a major, then you're going to find it very, very difficult. So what to do with these controls and things is actually you entrench the people who are already in power, you give them an advantage, and you make it really hard for anybody else to compete with them. Now, I think that's wrong. I think people should be allowed to compete. I think the government stops competition. They stifle everybody. They make it harder for people to rise. They harder for people to get ahead. And it's difficult. Now, as to what I would do if I was a young person now, if I was 20 years old again, actually, I think I'd probably do okay. The simple reason is this. that Australians are getting lazier. We're a rich society still. If somebody's prepared to get out there and work hard and doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, and I'm proud of the fact I got calloused hands because I work on my farm at the weekend. I enjoy it. I love it. So if you've got that kind of prepared to work, be enterprising in a lazy, fat society, then I think you can do very, very well. And we've seen this. You know, you've got a young guy like, I don't know if you've seen the things, Dan Cale, who's one of our stars. He started off, this is a high school dropout who was working at McDonald's. He left school like at the age of 15 or something, but as soon as he could, worked at McDonald's, did a few things. With great trepidation, bought a lawn mowing business in his early 20s. This guy is now just turned 30. He's a multi-millionaire. He's one of our top franchisors. He inspires thousands of people. This is a story of somebody who just has that character. So I think for people of character, there is fantastic opportunities now as much as ever.
I think you're right. You mentioned earlier how comfortable we are as Australians, and I do think that certainly for younger generations coming up, the willingness to endure discomfort with enthusiasm will be something akin to a superpower. Just that willingness to go, I'm uncomfortable. This kind of sucks, but I'm going to keep doing it because there's a bigger goal in mind. As you look at Australia,
secret of a good life is doing the things that are uncomfortable. If you're always doing the things that are easy and pleasant, you're in problems. Like I get up in the morning and I lift weights and I go for a run, half an hour, and I have a cold shower after it. That's a discipline. You make life difficult for yourself. And the same thing with work. You do things that you find uncomfortable. You get out there, you're mowing lawns. It's cold. It's 40 plus degrees. You don't even supposed to be allowed to work in there. But I used to mow lawns right through 40 plus degree days. I just did it. If it was raining, I'd still be out there mowing. You just have to pick up the grass differently. You can do the difficult stuff. And that's the secret of success in life, doing the things that are hard, not taking the easy road. Sorry I interrupted you, but
No, that's okay. You're the guest. I'm here to listen to you, not the other way around. I reflect on what you were saying before about how these regulations don't really hurt the entrenched companies so much. And there is a sense in which we're removing the bottom rungs off the ladder. The new people starting out, they're not able to step on that bottom rung. But I think that's true right across our culture. We have all the talk of a housing crisis, just to use one example. But I can't help but feel as though we don't have starter homes anymore. People complain, oh, well, your grandparents bought a house with whatever amount of money. Well, yes, but it was 2 bedrooms. It had one toilet that was out the back off the laundry. These things aren't like, one of these things is not like the other. And when you look at all the new housing that we're building, putting aside apartments, which are a different kettle of fish, and I don't think are a great way to start if you can help it, all of the homes that are being built now already have 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a double garage, all of the mod cons and the luxuries. Have we as a society gotten so comfortable now that we've essentially set a threshold where if you can't afford to be this high or higher, then essentially you just fall to the bottom? There's nothing in between.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think you can live in a very my first house was nothing special. It was 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom, very small place, but it was great. And I bought it off my lawn mowing earnings, basically. So it's good. And we need more. We need every kind of level. You know, young people can live in something like a granny flat quite comfortably, and we need more of those. We just need more small stuff. It's just crazy when the government comes in. It's like it's a saying like, we know what's better for you. I mean, you may think you want a small house that's just affordable. No, we know better. We know better. You need something better than that. And because we are infinitely wiser than you poor scum, you ignorant scums, we will tell you what is best for you. You know, it really infuriates me when, look, I give another example too, and this is totally different, but you get people talking about this ability to work from home. And you get these Labour Party politicians saying, look, it's better for the customer, it's better for the worker, and it's better for the boss because you have a better, more active staff. Well, how the stuff would you know? You've never even run a business in your life. All you've ever done is be a professional politician or a labour organiser. You've never run a business. So you're telling somebody in the real economy who faces this and knows what's going on, that you know better than them. What sort of incredible arrogance is that you think you know better than an employer what's best? It just infuriates me that people say things like that.
I could not agree more, but also on top of that, there's the arrogance of it, but there's also the ignorance of how an economy works. If this change was going to be that much better for employers, You'd better believe in a competitive marketplace where there are companies going out of business all the time that are looking for the 1%ers, they're looking for every single thing, then there would have already been a movement towards it. If there hasn't been yet, then either it's not better for them or there were regulatory impediments with the government telling them that they couldn't. And since we know that wasn't the case, then we know that in many businesses, it's not actually better for them. But politicians don't understand the money signals.
Yeah, when we actually do, some of our staff do work from home part-time. They just do. But we decide on a case-by-case basis. It depends who they are, what exactly they're doing, how they relate. A lot of people don't even like working from home, like the community of the office, actually. It's one of the strange findings. And they miss it. People missed it during COVID when they couldn't come in. But we understand the situation. We're the people to make the decision, not some ignorant politician who's never done it. And it's so sad. I mean, one thing you will see about the liberal side of politics, at least you've got more people who actually been in business. And I respect that.
Yeah. There are certainly more, but I would argue not enough based on the evidence of the recent run of prime ministers that we've had, including the Liberals.
But wrong end of business too. Not enough small business owners too. They understand the
that's true.
You know, a guy like Malcolm Turnbull, who was I think he was a better prime minister than people give him credit for. But the fact of the matter is, he wouldn't understand what it's like to run a lawn mowing business.
No.
You know, one of the most revealing things ever said by any politician was what Daniel Andrews said when he shut down all of my contractors for 2 months. He said, "You cannot get your lawns mowed or your houses cleaned." Now think of the wording of that. He didn't say you can't go out and mow lawns and clean houses. He said, you can't get your lawns mowed on you, because he was thinking about his people, the wealthy inner city elites. He couldn't give a stuff about the people, the 100,000 plus Victorians, because to him they're not real people. They're like they're animals. They're like something completely alien. Not my concern. Not my people. I don't care about you. I don't know about you. I don't think about you. You are nothing. You are scum. I'm interested in my left, woke, elite, inner suburban, affluent, educated followers. That's the real people, and that's the ones I care about.
Yeah. Oh, look, anytime you want to bash Daniel Andrews, I'm all ears. I'm wholeheartedly on board. But I can't help but notice that it's not just him. It's not just Australia. My mind goes to, it's a very different example, but my mind goes to London and Sadiq Khan, the mayor there, introducing a thing called the ultra low emissions zone, where they would basically charge working class people £12 per day if they drove a diesel or a petrol vehicle inside a certain zone within London. And his argument was that people should just get electric cars or perhaps take the tube. And of course, that's so out of touch, as you would know. Jim's Mowing franchisee, he's not going to be able to take the tube with all of their equipment to do their job. But that's true of so many different professions. And what that becomes is a tax on the poor. And another one of these things that kind of keeps that gap in between the rich and the poor. Why do you think we're seeing the same thing happening worldwide? Some people attribute it to some kind of a grand conspiracy. Other people attribute it to just cultural forces and that we're all kind of broadly in the same place at the same time. Do you have a theory as to why this is happening worldwide?
Yeah, there's a change in character. There's a broad change of character that's happening in the society as a whole. It's responsible for a whole lot of things. Ever-rising government is one thing, ever-rising social welfare, loss of community, the decline of marriage, the plunging birth rate, the rising levels of death, of despair, of suicide, of alcoholism and drug abuse. All these things are part of a general trend of a society that is becoming changed in a way. Now, this is a fundamental epigenetic change, and it's got to do with prosperity. It's got to do with excessive wealth, which is sapping the strength of the people. And it's got to do with the operations of the dopamine system and the way that it responds to various sorts of stimuli. There's a whole scientific background. In this new book that it's going to be produced next year called Birth Rate Crisis, talking about the reason for the plunging birth rate. It says this is a change in character and it's driven by wealth. And really, the problem with this, to you and I, it's fairly obvious what's going on. Most people don't see it because they're not temperamentally able to. The only way we can actually turn this thing around is through neuroscience. We've got to work out exactly what's happening, which we've got some idea of, we've got a pretty good idea of now, and then work out a way to reverse it. And you do that through treatments that will help people overcome drug addiction and depression and all the other evils of the world and loneliness and lack of community that will change character for the better. And once we do enough people having that kind of stuff, then that will turn society around. So actual fact, neuroscience, medicine is the only way to cure this thing.
So your ambitions were to become rich enough to be able to have your own lab. Do you have your own lab?
I do. It's run at La Trobe University. We're currently spending about $3 million a year. We've got an extensive research program we're going. We've been testing thousands of different drugs in various ways. We're testing them on nerve cells, and then we're doing different things. We're starting to test them on animals very shortly. Basically, we're looking at the effect of mild food restriction in animals, particularly in rats, which is actually quite beneficial to them. They live longer, and they're actually healthier. They're better parents, for example, better mothers.
Yeah.
Trying to reproduce this in a treatment, and we think that'll be extremely beneficial to people who have these kinds of issues. We're also looking at CRISPR, which is the way you understand epigenetics, how that works.
Yeah, and CRISPR is, of course, it's the natural process by which the body can repair DNA. And there's research, I'm assuming you're referring to research into how we might be able to actually use that.
Yeah, people do use CRISPR to actually change the genome. We're looking at using CRISPR can go into the genome and it can actually modify things. Now, what we're not interested in that. What we want to do is to go into the genome directly to the right site and then change the epigenetic settings. In other words, reverse the maleffects of too much wealth. And the great thing about CRISPR is it's really precise. You can say exactly where you want to go. You can hit the right genes in the right area of the brain and to have the effect we need. That's really exciting. We've got one of the top epigenetics people in the whole, CRISPR people in the whole of Australia, who's actually working with us on this now. And I would expect by the end of next year, we can reasonably expect to have some kind of results. The technology is going very fast. With all the despair about the change in society, and it really is in a terrible way, far worse than people think. The great, great hope is science, that we can actually understand and reverse this thing.
But there would be people recoiling in horror. This is sort of another layer of playing God, I suppose. It would be a continuation of a similar logic, that now we're getting so deep into the human genome, literally. How would you address concerns around that?
Well, I'd say Wegovy, for example, weight loss drugs. That's a perfect example of this kind of technology. In actual fact, some of these weight loss drugs seem to have a very similar effect to what we're talking about. They actually, people who take them tend to be, they've got side effects, which is a problem, like diarrhea. So there's some nasty side effects, but they do help people lose weight. But they also tend to get people off things like smoking and stuff, and they tend to be quite beneficial and psychologically. We're just trying to do something like that. We're just trying to produce a treatment that will help people to live better lives. If you're a person who are trapped by drug abuse, you're in a cycle and it's destroying your life and it's destroying your family. If there's a treatment that we can give you, which will help you to be able to turn your back on it and say, no, I don't need this stuff anymore. I can take decisions. I can think long term. What a blessing that would be. Because there are people whose lives are so destroyed by this dreadful stuff. And not just that, things like gambling and alcohol and all kinds of really destructive things. And we can change that. We can help people to be healthier in their minds as well as in their bodies. That's a really powerful thing. But when you do this, you're actually changing the epigenome. You're actually changing character. That's how they work. Okay. So fundamentally, all that CRISPR does is go more directly, and so let's go past all the side things and try and directly go to where you want to go to make those changes without possible side effects. That's the exciting thing about it. But it's the same thing. When you take a weight loss drug, you're actually changing your epigenome, and that's why it's effective.
So you mentioned earlier population, and the situation with population will collapse in many countries. If it weren't for immigration, we would have a declining population in Australia. I've been telling people for quite some time, if you think an increasing population is bad, wait till you experience a decreasing one. Throughout history, that's never been a good sign. I'm mindful that even back as far as the Roman Empire, they observed that the wealthy families would have 1 or 2 or 3 children, and the slave families, the poorest of the poor, would be having dozens of them. And back then, of course, they didn't have contraception in the way that we do. There's some of the explanatory factors now wouldn't have applied back then. What is it about wealth that leads to fewer kids?
Wealth changes character. Wealth is similar to drugs like cocaine. See, okay, think of how cocaine works. All right, what cocaine does is it puts a burst of dopamine into the brain, and dopamine makes you feel good. That's why the first time somebody has cocaine or heroin, they get this great feeling. Now, if they keep on having it, it doesn't work as well. Okay, and the reason for that is because what happens, your brain becomes desensitized to dopamine, and the receptors become less active. So you have to have more and more of the same thing to feel okay, and eventually you need this stuff just to feel normal. Now, that's kind of the same thing that's happening in society as a whole as a result of wealth. There's a change of character. Right. And what that does, one of the things it does is it changes the things that you're interested in. You're much more interested in things that you need more dopamine to be happy, so you need variety. Like you need things like porn or multiple sexual partners, or you need excitement, you need gambling, you need noisy parties, you need all this kind of stuff to be flooded with dopamine because your brain is so unreactive. Now, things like your partner is boring because it's the same person, okay? And children, they're pretty boring. They're not as interesting as going out and having fun and partying and going on exciting adventures and stuff. So those sort of things, family, partners, become less interesting, and the stimulation life becomes more so. So it's a fundamental change of character. Work becomes less interesting too. People don't want to get involved in work as much. You can see that in the changes in what's important to people, in young people in recent decades. They're much less likely to be interested in family and children, and less interested to be interested in a really absorbing career. And more after wealth and status and this kind of stuff too. So you're changing character. What we've got to do is to work out a way to change the character back. For people to say, have a kind of character that says, look, I really enjoy spending time with my husband or my wife. I really enjoy spending time with children. So I want more because that makes me happy, which is what I'm like too. I've got a lot of kids because I love kids. I adore children. I have 10 children and not nearly enough. I'd still have them every couple of years if I could, but my wife and I got a bit too old for it. But it's to me, it's incredibly joyful. And I love my wife, and I'm not interested in anyone else. I have that kind of character. I don't need these dopamine surging things. I love my life, and I love my work, and I love my family, and I love the purpose that I have in my life. And that's what you want for people, because that's actually it's saying that happiness isn't my goal, but by doing that, by doing the things that are meaningful, you actually create happiness in a way that other people can't have.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier that you've got a keen interest in defense. One of the things that often happens historically when hard economic times come, and I think we're heading into harder economic times here in Australia, it is not uncommon for that to prove to be a catalyst for war. Sometimes that's a matter of convenience for the powers that be. It's a way of distracting the populace from how unhappy they are at home, is to send half of them overseas and go and be unhappy somewhere else. And sometimes there are other factors that come into play, resource scarcity or things like that. Do you consider us to be at particular vulnerability over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years for some sort of a large-scale conflict that might actually involve the Australian landmass as opposed to being overseas, as all of our wars or almost all of our wars have been up to date?
Well, I don't think Australia's going to want to launch a war particularly, but we could get pulled into it over some issue like Taiwan in particular. I think it's exaggerated. I think the Chinese want Taiwan back, which they've actually had ruled for 500 years, been part of China since the 16th century. I think in the end they probably are going to get it back. But I don't see why we should get into a large war over that. But at the same time, we are in a dangerous situation. We're all by ourselves. We're not like the Americans who've got this giant, very powerful country with two giant oceans. We are a lot more vulnerable. We're a lot smaller. We're a lot nearer to danger than they are. It's absolutely insane that they spend 3.5% of their GDP on defense, and we spend 2% of ours, and we don't want to increase it. It's also spent in the most lunatic ways. Imagine that our whole idea of defending Australia is to maybe buy 2 submarines in 15 years' time. I mean, that's just ridiculous. If you look at what's going on in Ukraine, we don't need submarines in the far distant future. We need a lot of missiles and drones and things right now, and we need to spend more money and defend ourselves. I mean, everything we have, if we can't defend our own country, everything's gone. There is no Australia if we can't defend ourselves against foreseeable threats. We need to spend more. And the Americans are demanding that we spend more. For all I'm not a great fan of Trump, he's quite right. You know, he says, Australians, pull out your socks. We're doing our part. You do yours.
Yeah. It's extraordinary to me. Someone referred to Australia as a loot drop, which may not be a vernacular that you're familiar with, but in computer games, you will, if it's a multiplayer computer game, you'll be running around and shooting or whatever. And if someone dies in a certain spot, all of their gear falls on that spot and it becomes a loot drop. Someone else can run over and pick up all the things. And if you look at Australia, we're filled with resources. We're filled with opportunity for industrialization, if only we had the will to actually do it. We are basically this resource-rich, undefended loot drop for whichever country decides that they wanted to come and take it. We've been the lucky country, and was it Horn was his name? I think wrote the book The Lucky Country. I can't think of his first name, and he intended that as kind of an insult. He didn't mean it as a compliment. He meant it in the context of that book as saying that we're riding on luck, we're taking our luck for granted, and that luck is going to run out sooner or later. And I can't help but reflect on that and think, well, our luck has certainly held out for a good number of decades since that book was published. Do you think that we are riding on the coattails of luck of geography? And if our luck is running out, what form is that likely to take?
Yes, well, we have been a lucky country. We're blessed with this incredible mineral wealth, which we're doing stuff all about. But we are becoming lazy and fat and slow. We are going backwards. We are spending too much on social welfare. We have got an inefficient system that penalizes business, and we are not defending ourselves in any reasonable way. You're right. We are incredibly attractive target. We are so few people in such a wealthy land, and it's ridiculously crazy to be in a situation. It's like you're sending out somebody so vulnerable. It's like sending a woman out into a wilderness carrying a sack of gold and expect her not to be attacked. It's just beyond human. Anybody's got the power to say Australia's great. Why wouldn't we want it? Anybody could take us out if we can't defend ourselves. It's crazy. I mean, that is one reason for having a strong immigration, which I didn't think is overall about it. You have to get the right kind of immigrants. At least we've got enough people to help to defend ourselves. But we're vulnerable. We are extremely vulnerable. We're becoming weaker. We're becoming poorer. We are not spending money. We are borrowing it to the hilt in times of prosperity, and we're not defending ourselves. It worries me a lot. And the world could become a lot more dangerous. There are so many dangers in the world right now too. And I'm not just talking about the general decline, but things like biological warfare, for example, is a huge problem. You can now, quite possible for anybody with a backyard lab to create a pathogen that's as catchable as COVID, but with 20% mortality. I certainly believe that's where it came from. It came from the Wuhan Virology Institute. It was created deliberately and released accidentally. You could have something like an EMP, for example, which could be from like a solar flare Carrington event, or it could be from a hydrogen bomb in the atmosphere, which you hardly know. You knock out computers and electric power, and we're back. To say we're back to the 19th century is an exaggeration. We're back to the 10th century. Yeah. Because all our money is electronic. We are in a frightfully dangerous, vulnerable situation. And we're doing stuff all about it. We have so much in the way of resources and wealth, and we use it so poorly to prepare for the dire things that might happen.
I'm pleased to hear you mention the Carrington event. That is something that I do mention from time to time, and I feel like I'm a little bit alone on that one. So I'm very encouraged that you're across that as well. All right, so then let's shift.
People know what Carrington event is. The solar flare. This was in 1857, where actually the only reason people know it happened is because it kept on sparking off the telegraph. But if the same thing happened today, you'd wipe out most computers and most of the electrical systems. It would burn out the transformers. It would be absolutely tragic. There's a wonderful book called 1 Second After. Have you read that? It's about the aftermath of it was on the New York Times bestseller list. It's about the aftermath of an EMP set off by a nuclear explosion in the atmosphere and how it happened. And there was this community that it describes, which actually managed to only lose about 3/4 of the population, so they did quite well, and they just described people were dying and what the effects were. It's a really scary book, and people should read it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've certainly been an advocate for people having some level of resilience, a level of resilience to survive a complete collapse of the grid and all of the, as you say, the payment systems and money and communications. People say, oh, if the computer goes down, well, I can survive without my phone. Well, yes, but all of your water supply depends on there being functioning computers, and all of your everything else depends on that. That's a nightmare scenario. That's a worst case scenario type of scenario. But let's shift gears for a moment to some solutions. And you've been pushing for a yes in my backyard approach. And you're even, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, looking at dabbling in, considering a run into politics itself. What's the yes in my backyard idea, and how are you thinking about maybe pushing that forward?
Basically, what we want to do is to take off as many as possible of the zoning regulations that stop people building what they want, where they want. You don't have to do anything except the government's got to stop interfering. For example, you need to take away things like requirements that you have to have a car spot in a house. If people don't want to buy that, if they don't want it of a car, if it's close to the station, why force them to buy a more expensive house with a facility they don't want or need? In the inner city, why can't we have terrace house like you have in London and so many other places where people can just build up a bit? And terrace houses can be very nice, very scenic in inner suburban. Why does it have to be every house on a separate block? Why can't you have 2 or 3 story houses? Why can't you have development? Why can't you let people build what they want? Because that's what used to happen in the old days. Cities actually grew and they developed organically to meet people's needs, and housing was affordable. And somebody used to be able to buy a house with 3 years average income, could buy a typical house, not a great house, not a huge, but a house. Why can't we have that to happen again? And I believe, unlike most other things, this is something that's potentially solvable, because the outrage in the community is so great about housing unaffordability, about sky-high rents, that I think a movement, and it's not particularly a left or right issue too. You don't have to be a conservative. In fact, the probably Labor Party in Victoria is better than the Liberals in that sense. They're a bit more pro-development. So it's not a left or right issue. It's simply an issue that says we want affordable housing. We want our kids to be able to afford to buy their own homes without being crippled for decades by a ridiculous mortgage. If we had the same zoning system as Houston, Texas, as an example, and equivalent housing prices, our house price, the average house price in Melbourne or Sydney would be about $500,000. That's the equivalent of what it costs in Houston, instead of over $1 million as is now. Now, if that was the case, and then the starter houses were less, maybe 300,000, people would get into houses. You'd have cheaper houses people could buy. You'd have lower rents. The homeless, most of them would come off the streets because they can. That's the biggest thing that determines homelessness, is unaffordable rents. And you'd have an incredibly better and more equal society, which everybody has a stake in. I think it's so unfair. The current system basically, look, it rewards people who are wealthy, property owners, like myself, Fair notice. I bought a house 21 years ago, cost me $750,000. It's probably worth $2 million now. $2 million. I didn't do anything for that. I didn't create value. I haven't developed it. I haven't done anything. I just sat back and waited for this to go up. It's just lunatic. And it's on 5 acres. You could have 30 people living on this property if the government would stop forbidding you to develop it. That's what we need. We just need to get rid of the zoning. Stop it. Allow people to build what they want, where they want, with very minor, like you can't perhaps put a factory in the middle of a commercial area. You just build it next to another factory, for example, that kind of principle. And if you did that, we would have livable cities, walkable cities. We would actually be good for the environment, because they were dense. You'd have people who could live close to where they work. They could take public transport to work. You wouldn't need to have so many cars. You wouldn't be belching so many billions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The city would be, and it would be fairer. It would be more equal society. It'd be so people could, and you'd like to work for blue collar workers. People talk about the kind of industry. What about housing? Housing is a great way to employ blue collar workers. And they put people in trade, building their houses we so desperately need.
Well, it's a great point you made, and I think the problem, though, is that bureaucrats and politicians look at that and say, "But hang on, that's putting decisions back into the hands of those little people. We
Yes.
want all the decisions about planning to be in the hands of us, the elite, the educated, the ones who know what they're doing." You
You
mentioned,
may think you want this, but you may think you'd be happy with this, but we know better. No,
yes,
you
that's right.
can't have
Yes,
that. You may think you
that's
want
right.
a two-bedroom
That's
house,
right.
but no, we know
Yeah.
better. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't possibly know what's best for you. Me
No.
sitting in my mansion in Turak, I have far better knowledge about what you personally need, you poor scum. Because you're so stupid and I'm so intelligent and educated. How could you possibly understand your own needs? So obviously you don't. The arrogance is this beyond belief.
I think you'll fit in really well in politics. It sounds like you've been practicing. That was spot on. You used earlier, I think, a really key word or a phrase about people having a stake. If younger people could get into homes younger and have that, the bottom rungs on that ladder really is what we're talking about, back in place, then they would have a sense of having a stake in society.
Yes.
And it was Konstantin Kisin who first kind of really brought this into sharp focus for me when I was at a conference in London. And he talked about exactly this issue, that we've got an entire generation of young people growing up now who have actually stopped believing that they will ever own their own home. And there's something about that. I mean, you're talking about the epigenetics and you're talking about the way that wealth affects how we think. But I think there's a certain unmooring that takes place when people give up on this idea of actually owning a piece of that real estate. People are getting married later, they're having kids later, if at all. And a lot of it seems to come from this fact that we've made it really difficult by removing those bottom rungs. We've made it really hard for people to have a stake in Australia now.
Yes, yeah. And we're also driving inequality too. The difference between the people who've got money and property and power, like myself, okay? And we benefit from that. We own quite a lot of property. It's going up in value all the time. We've made a fortune for it. I don't deny it. I just think it's wrong. Think it's wrong. People, the government's job is not to say, okay, let's look at the rich. How can we rich them more? How can we take more money from the ordinary people and give more to the rich? Oh, here's another way. Let's give more money to the rich. I mean, a good example is the government paying off student loans. I think that's
yes.
What you're doing is you're taxing ordinary people, struggling battlers who haven't gone to university, who've got ordinary jobs, saying, let's take your money and let's give it to the privileged elite so they can actually make far more money than you, because it's not fair enough to have these things as equal as they are. Let's have them more unequal.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And the way that we preference tertiary education over trades, for example, like that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to spend money on education, why not spend it on helping people to be subsidized to become plumbers and electricians and carpenters, people we really need, rather than people doing art history and sociology and politics and philosophy, none of which have any benefit in society. There's a wonderful book called The Case Against Education by Brian Kaplan. Have you read that? It's
I haven't read that one, no.
Book. It actually suggests that what education does, beyond a very few specialist things like medicine and so forth, dentistry, what it does is it gives people a competitive advantage. So that if you go for a job and you said, well, I spent 5 years at university and I've learned all these useless subjects, oh, well, at least you're smart enough to go there. So I'll give you an interview, because it's too hard to find people anyway. So I'm not going to, this other person who hasn't gone to university can't get it. But in actual fact, what you've done has been almost no value to anybody, including yourself. You're not better educated. Right. And there's case studies about this. For example, if you go to a 3-year degree and you spent 2.5 years and then you don't finish, you've got virtually no advantage. Why? Because you do at 3, you don't at 2.5, because it's what's called a passment effect. So it's not what you know, it's the mere fact that you've shown yourself able to go through that thing. We waste trillions of dollars on garbage education, which is of no benefit to society. And the real education that we should be giving is people how to do practical, real things that society needs. If you're going to subsidize them.
Yep. And it gets even worse when you think about the fact that even within the areas of study that do have genuine value, let's take engineers and doctors and so forth, there's the issue of marginal utility. The first doctor in a city of, let's say, 1 million people, that first doctor is immensely valuable, life-saving. The second doctor, still life-saving. The 100th doctor, still life-saving. The 1,000th doctor, less so. The 10,000th doctor, well, now you're really pushing it. There's only 100 people per doctor at that point. You're starting to think, well, 10 people, sorry, do we really need any more? By the time you're training the 1 millionth person out of your 1 million to be yet another doctor, what you desperately need is a plumber, right? At that point, because the marginal utility, the marginal value of somebody else has become immense. And the marginal value of putting another person through that doctoral degree or that medical degree has actually become negative at that point. You're wasting money on that. And unfortunately,
Even something like medicine, though, the way they train doctors is actually insanely complicated and necessary. Now, for example, you talk about the role of a GP. It's quite reasonable to suppose that a well-trained nurse practitioner, for example, couldn't do many or most of the same job, because what GPs are faced with, you're not a thoracic surgeon, for example. And if you are going to be a surgeon, for example, why do you need to know so much about things that will never relate to your speciality?
Yeah.
Why can't you just be trained as a surgeon? Maybe do a 2 or 3 year course. Everything you know as a surgeon you learn, but you don't know everything else. They basically overtrain them to a ridiculous degree. And that actually means they restrict the supply of medical people going to medical school. They clamp it down. They make it incredibly hard, difficult, complicated to go through. They have to work insane hours as residents. And in the end, you haven't really got a great medical system because it costs a fortune, and you're not well suited. Modern medicine is very good at doing things like doing cesarean sections, for example. There's far too many of them. Very good at operations of that nature. We're very poor at dealing with chronic illnesses, which is the main problem in society. And actually, a lot less intensively trained medicine with a more concern about the human side and things like diet and exercise and counseling and so forth, we have a far healthier population.
Yeah. And I think also that principle that we were talking about before of kind of subsidiarity, of allowing more people to make their own choices. If we apply that to medicine and we say, well, at the moment take, for example, the removal of codeine. So, every now and again, I get migraines or other things where I need some codeine. Now, in order to have some codeine tablets on a shelf for that once every 3 or 4 months where I need them, I have to go and take up a doctor's time to get a prescription. And if we could lower that down to the pharmacist, and then take the things that you have to see a pharmacist for and put some of them back on the shelf, and take some of the surgeries that are right now you have to go to hospital, let's empower GP clinics and day surgeries to do more of those, and lower everything down a level or two within that system. Everything will become more abundant and cheaper. But that comes back to what you said before about the taxis, the protection racket. In a very real sense, what people are buying when they pay for a university degree is actually access into a protection racket, in this case, a medical one.
Yeah, exactly that too. Another example is the law too. Why do you need to do a 3-year law degree or 4-year law degree to become a lawyer? Because in fact, when a person finishes the law degree and goes out in the marketplace, they're virtually worthless. Now, somebody who's got 2 years experience is enormously employable, but at the beginning, most lawyers cannot find jobs. Why? Because the law degree is so irrelevant. Now, in the old days, a person became a lawyer by being apprenticed to a law firm. That's basically how it happened. And I don't think they were any worse as lawyers because of that. So the law degree doesn't protect anybody. What you really need is competition at every level. Qualifications are a very poor way of working out who is good. If I could think of it, if I had to run a business on the basis that I could only employ somebody who had a certain paper degree, but I couldn't fire them, I would have incredibly inefficient, unproductive business. But that is actually the situation with most professions. You have to have some minimalist degree, which is often completely tangential to the real needs of it. And then once you've got it, that's it. You can't be got out. It's almost impossible to get rid of it. And that's just bad and it's wrong. And it costs immensely. It actually slows down social mobility. If people were able to start, let's say, as a nurse, and they develop a few skills and get some experience, and then they can become something like a GP. Just a bit of experience and knowing how to handle things. And then you can use AI and so forth. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. You could have medicine which was a lot more human, a lot more effective, and a lot more affordable, and a lot more potential for people to actually rise up and improve themselves instead of having to go through this vast, complicated bureaucratic process.
So let's finish by saving the world here, Jim. What is it that you're talking about doing from a political point of view? How do you see yourself sort of going forward from here?
Basically, I think Yimby's got a hope. there's enough of an outrage about the cost of housing and the cost of rents that it's become a hot button issue. Look, I go on social media a lot and I say a lot of things that are very unpopular. After COVID, the stance I took at the beginning, 2 of my daughters wouldn't speak to me for months, literally.
Oh, dear.
And later said, that, Dad, I guess you were right. But the point was, at the time, it was very hard. So I do things that get me enormous flack. We put out stuff about the housing problems. I have never had such a positive response to anything. It's like 96% positive.
Yeah.
Now, it may be that individual people don't want it in their backyard, but as a community, as a society, we do want affordable housing, affordable rents, homeless off the street. We want people to be able to have a stake in society. We want our children to be able to afford to have homes without having an obscene mortgage around their neck for decades. People want that as a whole. If there was a sufficient movement at the state level, and it has to be at the state level, local councils don't have the power to do it, the state does, I think we could shift these things. If we could get, say, the balance of power in the upper house of the state parliament, which is not impossible because there is a trend towards smaller parties. If you had YIMBY parties like the Libertarians and other similar groups, took the balance of power and then work with whatever government's in power and says, okay, if you want this, we want that.
Yeah.
We want you to relax the zoning. If you could do that, if you could once gain control of the upper house of the state parliament, now that is what I would like to see happen next year. Having the Liberal opposition is pathetic. They really are so weak and so feeble. They're not really seen as an alternative government. Labor Party's on the nose. I think there's an opportunity more than there ever has been for smaller parties to actually get, especially into the upper house, and hold the balance of power and then force through changes. Working with either party, it doesn't matter who. You want what you want. You want to pass your budget. This is what we want. We want affordable housing. You do what you want. You do. We'll do what you want. You work with us. I don't think it's inconceivable to have that balance.
So, are you imagining that the YIMBY would almost be a not a brand, but a almost like a pledge that a party would sign up to? The Libertarians, I'm sure, would sign up to it. It's not that there is a YIMBY party so much as this is a stance that any party that is committed to it is welcome to take publicly.
That's right. That's what you want. You want people to stand for. I don't mind who it is. It can be a whole stack of different parties, but if they have that in common, the one thing in common. And I don't mind if you, generally speaking, you're Labor or Liberal or Green or whatever. Just have that one stance that says, when it comes to housing, we are going to push our way. And you can otherwise work with whoever you want. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're left or right or anything. Just have this one thing. We need affordable housing, affordable rents.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually possible. I really think it's possible next year. Now, if it doesn't happen, the last thing I really want is a long-term political career. I've got quite enough to do. What I'll probably do is stand against some Labor member of Parliament and try and get a seat in the lower house. I think that's the most noisy thing I could possibly do. But by speaking out, by talking, and by sessions like this, make my voice heard and be a strong voice for fairness in housing.
Look, I think you make a lot of sense. Your business experience speaks well of you. You're an exceptional communicator, and I would love to see. I mean, look, Victoria needs a shake-up. Your assessment of the opposition and the government, I think, are both spot on. We need a big shake-up. And the upper house in Victoria, because they still have the districts, that is an area where you do have the opportunity to get a couple of people in on a given platform around different parts of the state. I think that has the potential to work. Someone like yourself with your profile running in the lower house, you know very well that is a dramatically less likely thing to win than the upper house is. But that's not really the point in your case. I would imagine that the point of having you run in the lower house is the noise and the attention that draws. And if you were to pick a high profile fight and make a good fight out of it, you'd potentially really help the chances of those other YIMBY candidates in the upper house. As a strategy, I like it. I like it. So I want to come right down. We've gone kind of from Jim and how you started, and we've gone global, and we've talked all kinds of things. And I want to kind of come right down to the people listening. So people listening are going to be in any one of a million different life circumstances, and there's no one little platitude or truism that's going to inspire each and every one of them. But if you could leave there, what have we got now? 676 people watching right now live. There would have been a few thousand over the course of the live so far, and there'll be many thousands more in time to come. If you could leave something with them that you think would be useful or relevant to people in Australia today, what would that be?
I'd speak. Look, politics is a passion, but I think we have to look to ourselves. How do you create a good life? How do you create a good, effective life? And that means taking hard decisions, doing things for the sake of what you believe in, setting your life with a purpose, saying, what is my life for? What am I after? What I want to achieve? And then you put the steps in place. And the steps are these: self-discipline. In other words, we resist sensual pleasures as much as possible, and the porn and the nasty things that go on. We stay away from social media. We connect with real people. We build fresh relationships. We stay close to our family, to our parents, to our children, to our partners. We look after our health. We get exercise. We stay away from dangerous drugs and alcohol and these kinds of things too, because they're destructive of character. If you have any kind of faith, go back to church or temple or synagogue or wherever it is. Be part of a faith community. Apart from that, join groups that mean something, form a relationship with them and do something with your life. When it comes to money, look, it's important to make a good income. You have to support your family. But piling up wealth to buy more and more stuff is not productive. It doesn't help society. It doesn't help you. The best way to spend money, actually, they've found, is to give it away to a cause that you're involved with. So if it creates community, if it creates purpose, use it for that. Don't use it just so people can look at you, oh, he's got a great car or a great house or had great holidays. Get away from that. Get away from the boasting and the competition. And live for something beyond yourself. Live for God is the ideal, but live for your fellow man, live for your community, and do the things that are hard instead of taking life easy. And don't make happiness your goal. If you think, I want to be happy, that's my goal, then you'll do the easy things and you'll fail. Do the hard things, do the disciplined things, and then happiness comes to you as a blessing, as an indirect result.
Yeah. Well, Jim, this chat has been an absolute thrill. I would love to keep it going even longer. Unfortunately, I'm up very early tomorrow and heading to Melbourne, and I've got yet another big day of work ahead of me. So I regret that I couldn't make this a record length slow chat, because I have a funny feeling that we could have actually pushed that 5-hour record if we'd given ourselves permission to do so. But unfortunately, I just can't. Jim, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. To everyone watching, thank you for watching. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've hardly had to do anything. I've just sat here and listened to Jim as he's given us so much. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a one-off. At this point in time, I'm not planning on bringing the slow chats back long-term. This is kind of dipping my toe back in the water, and I had the opportunity to have a chat with a man that I've admired for decades, literally. And so I've done that tonight. But let me know in the comments whether you think that this is something I should bring back on a more regular basis, and how you'd like that to happen, which night of the week, and should I be going for 5 hours, and all of that sort of stuff. Let me know. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Jim, for joining us. And we're going to end now. Cheers.
Thank you.